one of the most overrated generals in World War II. Mostly because of the defense of the Philippines in 1942. The forces were like this: 150,000 American soldiers against an invasion force of 130,000 Japanese. You'd think the numbers would compensate the Americans, right? Well, for some reason, the entire American Air Force in the Philippines, apparently it was concentrated in a few points, which the Japanese gleefully bombed to shit, knocking out half of the American Air Force in the Philippines. Then, for some reason, Douglas MacArthur has the bright idea of defending the entirety of the island at once, instead of retreating to several strategic hardpoints, like the island of Corregidor. By the time he actually did that, it was too late. The Japanese overran the entirety of the Philippines. So, perhaps the popularity of MacArthur was not because of his tactics or his genius, but it was because he was the darling of the army, if you know what I mean. In my opinion, I think Chester Nimitz did more than MacArthur.
Well, at the end of the day, Patton's always going to be the man.
Patton actually did a lot of shit. For example, in the Battle of the Bulge, he was... Yeah, sorry?
I was like, the one thing I've always respected the most about Patton was his necessity to actually be able to see the battle unfold in front of him, to be able to better make his decisions. That is something I highly respect even to this day, because not many generals or officers, let alone generals, do that.
Let me tell you a thing. I'm more of a Rommel fanboy, so...
That's something I was going to bring up. It's like, everybody's like, oh, Nazis are evil. Rommel was a patriot. That was his thing. He did not care about the Third Reich. He cared about Germany.
Yeah, but Rommel wasn't a Nazi per se. He was a military man. That's something a lot of people forget. There were a lot. There were people in the Wehrmacht, for example, who had no idea what was going on with the Allgemeine Schutzstaffel, the Allgemeine SS, which were the guys that were the guards at the concentration camps and stuff. And when Rommel found out what a fucking idiot and madman Adolf Hitler was, he was involved in the plot to assassinate the guy. So, I mean, yeah, I have a great deal of respect for Rommel as well, and he was a brilliant tactician, as well as a person who had some ethical standards, right?
About Rommel, I want to tell you a thing. We all talk about Rommel as if his military career started in World War II.
Oh, I know. He had the Pour le Mérite, the Blue Max from World War I.
Yeah, but you want to know how he started out? He started out as the commander of a mountain battalion. The Württemberg battalion.
Württemberg, yeah.
The Württemberg, yep. In which apparently he claimed in his book, which I have read, the infantry attacks, Infanterie greift an, which is basically a military manual.
Yep, I've read that too.
Yeah, he claims that he had to win the trust of the men by going into hunting clubs. Because apparently the men of the Württemberg only respected dedicated hunters.
Well, the aristocracy in Germany, in the German Empire, were very interested in hunting. I mean, if you are familiar with Rittmeister Manfred Freiherr von Richthofen, better known to us as the Red Baron, there is a reason that he started naming his squadron the Jager squadron, the Jagdgestaffel and all that stuff. All that stuff is based on the word Jager, which means hunter in German. And if you have read his book or any of the biographies about him, there's a lot of talk about how he used to go wild boar hunting in Silesia or Schlesien, which is where he was from. kind of at the, that little indentation on the southeastern part of the German Empire where Czechoslovakia kind of poked into it there. That was inside the German territory there, and that was Silesia there.
Sorry, go on.
No, that's all I had to say about it at the moment.
Oh, I see. Well, the thing is, Rommel in World War One actually did some amazing stuff, fighting against the Belgians, the French, the Romanians, the Italians. There's this story of that apparently an entire Italian battalion surrendered to him, which was apparently during the Battle of Caporetto. Because apparently Luigi Cadorna was being a fucking dick to his men. It is a great contrast. On one hand, you have fucking Rommel, a military genius, a father to his men, basically. And then you have Luigi Cadorna. What a scum of a man that was. Want to know how? For example, Berserker. Have you ever heard about that man, Luigi Cadorna?
Never a nice word.
Never a nice word, huh? Never.
Even reading stuff recounted by Italians themselves that served under him, it was never a nice word.
It was because it was fucking deserved. You know what Luigi Cadorna was exactly? He was the supreme commander of all of the Italian armies in World War One. And his idea of improving morale in the army was basically massive punishments and decimations. This guy had more disregarded the lives of his men more than fucking Douglas Haig.
Yeah, there are a lot. I mean, you get some commanders, some officers who are very competent, and you get some who are not. I mean, there is a thing in Hogan's Heroes. Have you ever seen the television show Hogan's Heroes?
I think I've heard about it, but yes, I think so.
So there's one of the episodes where they hatch this scheme where they're going to get Colonel Klink, Commandant Klink, to tell General Burkhalter that there's an old Prussian saying, and Klink interrupts and says, "But I'm not an old Prussian." And Hogan points out, General Burkhalter is, So this old Prussian saying, allegedly, and I don't know that this is real, it may be something they made up for the show, right? And it may not have even been intended to be real. It may have been something that they just made up, in the context of the show itself, that they came up with the idea to tell Klink, blah, blah, blah. But the old Prussian saying was, a soldier is only as good as the officer he serves under. So if you've got a shitty officer, you've got shitty soldiers. And that's not entirely true. I mean, I was in ROTC, and I knew some really incompetent cadets from other universities, because we would come together occasionally for FTXs, field training exercises. Some of these people didn't even know how to shoot an azimuth with a compass, so we would be running around out in the woods not knowing where the hell we were, because these people who were supposed to be our, the people looking at the compass to figure out where we were, didn't know what the fuck they were doing. I mean, I asked one of them, I said, haven't you been something about an azimuth? I don't remember exactly what I said. And he goes, what's an azimuth? And I go, dude, why are you on the compass if you don't know how to shoot an azimuth? And he just kind of looked at me stupefied, and I'm like, oh my God, what the fuck? These are the people that are going to be leading our soldiers, and because I wasn't. Yeah, I mean, fuck.
I mean, I know people in the military, so let me rescue your faith. Those people don't ever last long in combat situations. They think they're in charge, but there's always going to be that grizzled sergeant who's seen it all, who's going to tell them to get their pampered asses to the back of the goddamn squad and let them do their job.
Right.
Indeed. But I was going to tell you a thing. So you were telling the thing of incompetent officers, but this guy, Giovanna, was the supreme commander of the entire Italian army. How did a guy...
Right, well, I
How
mean,
did a guy that bad...
it's a political thing. I mean, whenever you get to be in a position like that, it's because you've been appointed by some dumbass in a political office, right? I mean, we didn't have General of the Army, MacArthur or Eisenhower, until FDR appointed them as such. And so he put Eisenhower in charge of the European theater and MacArthur in charge of the Pacific theater. But the point is, it was a president who put them as the supreme Allied commander in this theater and in that theater. So it was a politician who did it. Fortunately, FDR had some idea of what was going on, and both of those guys were relatively good tacticians. I mean, I assume that FDR had advisors that he actually listened to, unlike some presidents who seem to think they know better than anyone else about everything.
Yeah. So, but even so, imagine this. Want to know what happened after Caporetto? The entire Italian Second Army vanished. It disappeared from the map entirely. With it, can you imagine what happened? That was the end of Luigi Cadorna's career. It was the end because there was no saving face from it. How do you save face from the loss of an entire army? I don't think you do. I don't think you get a free Scotch out of it. In the end, replacing him was the best decision ever for the Italian army because the Italian army's performance improved after he left. Hell, they even beat the Germans and Austrians in Mount Grappa after.
Did you say free Scotch?
Well, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I'd like some free Scotch. I'm actually drinking a bit of single malt right now, Glenlivet, but the idiom is Scot free. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that because it kind of caught my ear.
Yeah, back to Rommel before I get off topic. The thing is, Rommel was a military genius, but he also made some mistakes. Let's not forget about it. For example, have you seen the siege of Tobruk, for instance?
Yeah. I mean, there was a book I read back in high school, I guess, called In Search of the Desert Fox, and it talked a lot about his entire career from, before World War II started. It talked about his career in World War I. It talked about, what he did in between the wars, and it talked about World War II and what he did in North Africa and what he did in Normandy and so forth.
Thing is, Tobruk was a fucking bitch to deal with. Basically, an entire fortress city built. Fortresses built by the Italians, by the way. And the thing is that you could not siege that city properly. You want to know why? Because the fucking Royal Navy was there.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you siege a fucking city if it keeps getting shipments from the sea? You know what I mean?
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's impossible to render it via siege. But then again, the first strikes of Rommel on the city were very clumsy to begin with. Speed against an entrenched opponent doesn't work, especially in a city. Mistakes were made. Yeah, mistakes were made. But we gotta admit that he did what he could. Right?
Well, I mean, there is no such thing as a perfect human being. We all make mistakes. I mean, I might have even made one or two a couple of centuries ago. It's been a while. But no, I'm kind of joking. I'm joking. But yeah, one of the things that I remember from reading the book about Rommel was that this psyop that he did where he took the tanks and the half-tracks and so forth, and the troops themselves, and marched them through this little village several times, where they go back around and come back through, you know, to make the people there and the spies think that their force was much larger than it actually was. And then he had like plywood put onto jeeps to make them look like tanks and stuff like that. So he was really doing a lot of psychological warfare there to convince the enemy and the locals that the Afrika Korps had actually more equipment and personnel than it actually did.
Yeah, the thing is, to me, the North African theater considered one of the greatest blunders of Hitler in World War II. Because I'm going to go the argument that in North Africa laid the key to the defeat of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom depended on the Suez Canal in order to connect the British main islands with the rest of the empire, right?
Right.
So, if the Germans took the Suez Canal, all of the shipments between India and Britain would be either cut off, or they'd have to circumvent through the entirety of Africa. You know what I mean? It's a really long delay, if you ask me. Now, after taking the Suez Canal, you know what's there after? The oil fields of Iraq.
Yeah, exactly.
What was the German army starving of mostly? Oil.
Yep, exactly.
So you get that?
My dad's brother was in World War II, and he was in North Africa, and he was in Iran, in Tehran. I don't know exactly what they did there. And then later on, he went off to India, still during World War II. I don't know really much about what he did in Iran or India, but I did kind of talk with him about what he did in North Africa, so I got to hear him. And I showed him this map out of the very book that I was telling you about. I'm pretty sure the title of it was In Search of the Desert Fox. Anyway, I still have it somewhere. It was a paperback published back during the 70s. And I had showed him this map in the middle of the book, and it probably still shows the indentation of his fingernail as he pointed out to me where he went and where he was stationed and stuff. He just kind of like pushed his finger against it, and his nail drug a kind of an indentation in the image. So he showed me where he had traveled and stuff like that. It was very interesting to get him to talk about it, because, you know, a lot of people that have been in war, they don't really want to talk about it after the fact. But he saw that I was interested and I wanted to know about the history. And so he told me, you know, some of the stuff that he had experienced and things like that.
Indeed, but the thing is, how you call it? I was gonna tell you a thing that the desert fox, as you call him, well, he had actually gotten past Suez and gotten into Iraq. If you get into Iraq, you know what also falls? Turkey. Because Turkey was neutral at the time, you know? But with the German army approaching from the south, Turkey would be forced to open its borders to the Third Reich, which would mean that the resources from North Africa could be transferred through Turkey back to Europe. You have now a supply line of precious oil coming from Iraq to Berlin. Now, the problem lies with this. He could have done it if he had the fucking means to do it, which he never did. While Rommel was continuously asking for new generation German tanks for his forces, guess what the fucking Axis High Command sent him always? Shitty Italian tanks. Italian tanks that were not worth a damn against the British. Because have you seen the M1340s, for instance? Even a weak anti-tank rifle could penetrate those.
They were no match to American tanks. They basically would rip through them like tissue paper.
The M13s, yes, they were fucking horrendous. Also, have you ever heard, Giovanna? Have you ever heard of the CV-33? Or not really? Because the CV, you know what it stands for? It stands for Carro Veloce, which means literally fast tank. Carro Veloce, which means fast tank. And you want to know what the biggest weapons of that thing was? A pair of machine guns.
Oh, for fuck's sake. That's like a goddamn troop transport. It's not even a tank.
It's just an armored car, basically, with a what do they call them? Armored personnel carrier or something that would have no big gun, but just a machine gun instead.
Now, the problem with the thing is, as a scouting tank, it could work. But the thing is, the Italian High Command used them as the main battle tank, mostly, apart from the M13s. And when I see that, I'm like, when you guys seriously wanted to fight a world war with this?
I don't know why anyone ever thought Mussolini was intelligent at all.
Bumbling buffoon.
I wasn't aware that people thought that.
What a bumbling buffoon. I mean...
Well, there had to be somebody who thought he was intelligent, or else he wouldn't have been put in charge of things and become Il Duce.
So the Fiat Ansaldo M3040, and I'm searching, the thing only weighed 13 tons, which is very light. Very light for tank standards. How much is the weight for the Sherman, for instance? Hang on.
I would guess to say double that at least.
And we all talk shit about the Sherman most of the time. A lot of people like to talk shit about the Sherman. But when I see that and I compare it to the Italian tanks, I'm like, what the fuck are you telling? The Sherman is awesome.
Oh, yeah, the Sherman also had those, I don't remember what they were called, but my brother built a model of one time, and it had this kind of metal thing on the front of it that had, like, blades that would cut down the brush as it was, coming upon the brush. It would cut the brush out of the way so that it didn't bog down in that stuff. Obviously that was not really an issue in North Africa, but say, like, in Europe, it would have been.
Yep. The ones you told were used in Normandy, especially, in order to clear the bocage. Because, smartly, the German army established a key of defensive networks around the bocage. You know what I mean? It's basically, that thing was a kill zone after a kill zone after a kill zone after a kill zone.
And all those, I don't know what they call them, but they're basically giant caltrops. Those big X-shaped things with those things.
Yep. With the issue is the Allies only managed to advance after clearing the bocage. And the only way to clear the bocage was using those Shermans you mentioned. Also, I've been checking the weight of the Sherman Berserk. It's 38 metric tons. You compare it against the Italian tank, which was 13 tons. I'm really sorry, but the Sherman... I'm really sorry, but if I were an Italian tank crew and I saw a Sherman in front of me, I'd be like, well, guess I'm fucking dead now. Guess I'm fucking dead because my fucking tank is shit. Makes me wonder what the fuck was Italy thinking at the time. But then again, German diplomacy always fucking works. So they somehow managed always to get corpses of allies, if you know what I mean.
Well, when I mentioned you have leaders, politicians who put people in positions of authority in the military. Some of these leaders, some of these politicians are competent and some are not. And it's been kind of a running gag for a long time that Hitler was one of these people who thought he knew better than the generals, in spite of the fact that he never rose above the rank of corporal himself. You know, I mean,
Exactly, yes.
he was famous or notorious for not listening to his advisors and stuff.
Yeah, the thing is, the whole thing of the invasion of France gave Hitler a massive ego boost. Let's call it like that. Because he had one good stroke. He had the idea of attacking a fort called Evenemile. Not sure if you know about it. Evenemile is a fortress in Belgium, in which it controlled a key junction which the German armies needed to cross, right? But you could not cross it with the fortress in the middle. So Hitler checked the plans, and he said, "The ground of the fortress is as straight as a field. The paratroopers can land on it." And that's what they did. They landed paratroopers on the fortress, knocked out the guns of the fortress, and the entire fort surrendered when the first German tanks approached.
Right. Well, you know, even a broken clock is right twice a day, right?
Yes, it is. But then
one that seems more fitting is even a blonde squirrel finds a nut every now and
then. Yep. But the thing is, the real problem started after the failure of Operation Typhoon. Typhoon was the last offensive on Moscow, which ultimately failed. Guess what Hitler did after the failure of the offensive? Around like a lot of the German generals of the time were fucking sacked. Von Rundstedt sacked. Von Bock sacked. Guderian sacked. Everyone was fucking sacked. All because and even one of the generals was condemned to death. Want to know what this general did? He retreated his forces from Crimea after a Soviet counterattack was about to cut him off. Which is funny because in the end, the orders of the Führer contributed a lot to the demise of the Wehrmacht. Not even sure what the fuck was he thinking in that regard. But
which general was that?
Meth heads don't make good decisions if you're talking about Hitler.
Well, yeah, that's another thing. Hitler was definitely on methamphetamines, and you know, with with extensive and or long-term use of methamphetamines, you develop a condition known as methamphetamine psychosis, which is characterized by delusions and paranoia. I mean, yeah, look, Hitler was pretty fucking paranoid, obviously. That's part of the whole, the whole Nazi Germany regime was characterized by paranoia. It was you know, creating this boogeyman of the Jews and the international bankers and stuff to turn them into some kind of worldwide conspiracy, and they had to be put down. That's a clear sign of paranoia.
Yep. Also, you were asking which general was condemned to death for this thing, right?
Right, yeah.
Well, yeah, where can I post them? Because I found them.
Just post it in. Do you have permission to post in the text channel for voice just above us there? I think you do.
Text channel. Oh, yes, here. Well, here.
Right above the stream.
This guy.
Yeah.
This guy, General Hans Graf von Sponeck. He was the commander of the 17th Army Corps. And by the time he was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross.
Right.
So that's a very huge award.
I've never heard of this guy. I'm gobsmacked by that. But I do know that. What did you say his name was again?
Hans Graf von Sponeck.
Graf von Sponeck. That means Count of Sponeck. Yeah, so
Yep.
he was a count. He was an aristocrat back before the German Empire was forced to cease to exist and turn into a republic with the Weimar Republic.
Yep. The thing is, Sponeck was how you call it? Sponeck was leading was one of the commanders in Crimea during the siege of Sevastopol, right? When the Russians launched a counterattack in order to try to relieve Sevastopol, his regiment or his army had to fall back, or else risk annihilation. Hitler didn't take it very well. And in the end, well, he ended up being condemned to death, and he was killed in the 23rd of July of 1944, 2 years after his initial official condemnation. Sponeck was tried in front of none other than Hermann Goering, guilty of disobedience to a superior officer and given the death sentence.
Fat Hermann. Von Richthofen never liked Goering.
Yeah, did he have a beef with him or something?
Back in World War I, von Richthofen, the Red Baron, he was the guy that was in charge of the hunter squadrons, the flying circus and all that. And he didn't regard Goering as... I forget exactly what was his beef with Goering, but it seems like he thought Goering was too full of himself, which seems to have been the case, right?
I mean, well, and even then, I'd say out of all the Nazi leadership, he wasn't exactly the worst. Even if he was full of himself and living a very lavish life, let's call it like that. But the thing is, there was a story of Hermann Goering that is very funny. You know what he said to one of the newspapers of the Reich when asked about the possibility of the enemy launching strategic bombings against Germany? He said, "I promise you that not a single bomber shall hit Germany." And I'm gonna say this, quote unquote. If that happens, quote, if that happens, you will start calling me Meyer from now on, quote. It's not surprising when the Game of Hearts of Iron 4 calls him Hermann Meyer instead of Hermann Goering.
I remember that quote, yeah. I think you've mentioned it before.
Yeah, probably. I mean, probably in that end, but it's whenever I think of that, I'm like, you're so fucking full of yourself, Goering. But then again, he was also responsible for the disaster of Stalingrad in a sense, promising he could build a fucking air bridge on the city, which ended up costing a lot of planes to the Wehrmacht for nothing. Well, also, by the way, I'd love to talk more, but I gotta get going. It's late here.
Yeah, we've been going now for 2 hours and 16 minutes, and I generally would like to keep these about 2 hours, roughly. I mean, certainly if my ISP were cooperating with me and playing nice, you know, it might be possible to go for longer. But honestly, there are now, let me look again. There are now 1, 2, 3, 4 different stream videos up on my channel, all named the same thing. One of them is 19 minutes and 28 seconds, one is 22 minutes and 16 seconds, one is 12 minutes and 40 seconds, and then the current one, which says live now, so it doesn't have a time. Let me see if it will tell me. Oh, it says elapsed time 34 minutes and 57 seconds, which will obviously be 35 by the time we're done. So yeah, I guess I had hoped that maybe my boyfriend would join us tonight, and I also I thought maybe Kraut of Kraut and Tea would join us. He has said occasionally that he would come in, and the first time he forgot about it, and so I guess the second time was when we had our first big disconnection issue with the ISP, and the third time he apologized later, but didn't give any reason why, and that's fine. I mean, I don't need any explanation, but I would like to have him in sometime, eventually.
Well, yeah.
I mean, he's a good YouTuber. I have been subscribed to him for almost as long as he's had his channel, maybe a month or two after he started it. And unfortunately, he's not making videos at the moment. So, hey, Kraut, if you're listening to this live or later once I upload the video, I want you back on YouTube, dude. Come back to YouTube and make videos again. Make great fucking videos. You guys agree with me, right?
Yep. Listen, I do agree with you in that regard, but I really need to get going because I gotta brush the teeth and all that shenanigans before I go to bed.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us, and dream well and all that stuff. Buonanotte.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good night. See ya.
Bye-bye. Okay, so, well, there we go. It's just me here now, and as you all may or may not be aware, if you've been watching, I don't think anyone is watching the current stream except me. Yeah, there have been issues with my ISP connections. I went into some detail about it earlier in one of the earlier streams, or earlier parts, chapters maybe of this stream. Like I have said in both the live chat and in a voice here on the video, I'm going to be taking down all 4 of these streams and putting up a video instead, because as I was streaming, I was also recording. So I do have the video recorded, or it's, it's recording now, and it says the total time is 2 minutes 20 seconds, 2 hours 20 seconds and 30 seconds now. Blah, whatever. 2 hours 20 minutes and 35 seconds. So anyway, thanks for watching. Those of you few who did look in during the live part of the stream. I know there weren't a lot of people who did, and that's fine. But yeah, I understand entirely that people would get frustrated with the stream disconnecting and reconnecting and so forth and so on. It seems that at one point we had 14 people watching, which was pretty cool. Much more than I would normally get in a stream. So that was in the second chapter, so to speak, of the stream. I am going to go ahead and say good night and everything. So for Republic News, this is Liviana, and I will say until next time, have fun, but stay safe. Hopefully, by next time, I will have some kind of resolution to this ISP fuckery, and can do an actual stream without any interruptions. I mean, it's really obviously they're fucking with me at this point, because, like I said earlier, I've had for the past couple of months or so, it's been very touch and go with my connection. It sometimes has dropped down to 3G, sometimes down to 1G, and sometimes I've had no connection at all. And like today and yesterday, it's been showing 4G the whole time, but it absolutely refuses to allow me to connect my computer to it. So I've had to resort to using Ethernet instead, which means using my smartphone to connect, which is not entirely satisfactory. Fortunately, the amount of data I use on the smartphone is also covered by my Wi-Fi plan, so I'm not in any danger of going over my allotted limited data package by using the smartphone. So anyway, as I said, until have fun, but stay safe.